Awesome. Thanks, Taylor, for helping us with the video. And welcome once again to all of our participants for this virtual community meeting. It looks like the video got a little pixelated there, and sometimes that happens in a webinar environment. And the reason, as you can imagine, that we're doing these community meetings via webinar is because of the social distancing requirements. And so there are some challenges that are inherent in webinars, and but at the same time, we're just really grateful that we have this technology so that we can still connect with community members on this important project. So this is one of the virtual community meetings that is being conducted as part of the Oahu Stormwater Utility Study. And the City and County of Honolulu is conducting this study and is conducting these meetings. I'm going to take control of the slides. And it takes a moment. Taylor, if you can help me, there we go. We'll just stay on the agenda slide. Okay. Sometimes it takes a minute just to get the slides rolling. So what we're going to do in today's meeting is provide some important updates on the community engagement process, as well as on the stormwater utility study itself, and especially talk about what we heard in the first round of community engagement and how that is linking up to the directions that the study is taking at this point, as well as some important considerations for the situation that's the result of COVID-19. I apologize, I'm having a little bit of a delay advancing the slides. So I would like to introduce you to our meeting team. And I'm Joan Isaacson, I'm the facilitator, I'm there in the middle. And you can see on the video screen, as well as on the slide, is JB Hines. She's our stormwater utility specialist with Birchline Planning. And you'll be hearing from her a bit on the presentation. Also important to our meeting team is Cami Kloster. She's with G70. She's our public outreach manager. Taylor York is driving our webinar for us this evening, or excuse me, this afternoon. And we have Randall Wakamoto, of course, who is our lead from the Department of Facility Maintenance for the City and County of Honolulu. And he is the chief for the Stormwater Quality Branch. And Randall, if you are on, would you like to say a few words of welcome?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So want to thank everybody for participating in this remote webinar meeting. I think, again, just like Joan mentioned, I'm from the City and County of Honolulu. I'm the from the Department of Facility Maintenance, our Stormwater Quality Branch. Our branch is basically responsible for administering a lot of the city's stormwater permit programs. So you'll hear a little bit more about that from JB, but want to thank everybody for participating in this this meeting, and we really look forward to hearing a lot of your comments and questions.
Excellent, thanks so much, Randall. And JB, do you want to pop in and say hi too?
You bet. Aloha, this is Julie Beth Hines. I go by JB. I'm the principal of Birchline Planning, and I provide support to municipal governments on water quality programs and water quality finance. I also spent about 11 years as a public sector manager running a stormwater utility, and I'm delighted to be with you and delighted to be supporting the city and county in this important study.
All right. Thanks, Randall and JB. Appreciate that. An important part of our webinars that we are conducting is hearing your input. And I just want to let you know that there are a couple of ways that you can do that. And after the presentation, we have a lot of time scheduled for Q&A and discussion, and we'll be doing that through the chat box. If you want to be able to write your comments in or your questions, it's a good way to do that. But if you also want to just jump on the line and talk with the group, you can use the raise hand function, and that allows us then to call on people And that way we avoid people talking on top of each other, which sometimes can happen in a webinar environment like this. And I'll talk more later about where to find those functions on your screen. I also want to let you know that after the meeting, if additional thoughts come to you or questions, I know that happens to me, you know, if I'm driving home from somewhere or making dinner, I'll just like get a brainstorm about something. So after the meeting, you can continue to communicate with us using our project email address, which is on the screen and of course is on our website. And you can even submit comments directly from the website itself. The website address is listed at the bottom of this slide, stormwaterutilityOahu.org. The presentation slides will be posted on the website. We're also creating a video recording of the presentation, and we'll post that with closed captioning so that anyone who doesn't get a chance to join one of the webinars, they can check out the slides or they can see a recording of the presentation itself. So I wanted to share some tips for productive discussions that help our community meetings. And an important part of that is all of us are really committed to making sure that everyone who decides to participate, that everyone gets equal airtime to contribute and provide their perspectives. And so we always want to make best use of our time. And so when sharing comments and questions, it helps that to keep things concise, and that way we can hear from as many people as possible and as many perspectives. And we also just find it's helpful that we really listen for understanding before we before we just jump into making quick opinions about things. And then also, if we all put on the frame of mind of helping to identify solutions as well. So that's the context for the meeting, and I'm just going to keep rolling and to cover the first part of the presentation, which is focusing on the public and stakeholder involvement. And I'm going to give you an update on the round 1 outreach that we conducted earlier in the year, really focusing on reporting to you all what we heard in that first round, and then talking about the round 2, which is the round that we're in right now, and the focus of this round. So let me tell you, from day 1 of this study, the City and County of Honolulu really prioritized the importance of hearing from community members and other stakeholders to inform the study, the types of issues to be researched, and to collect input that can really shape and form potential recommendations for a stormwater utility, as well as the priorities for the different types of programs that a utility could cover. And as part of that, one of the first things we did was to set up a pretty comprehensive website. And if you haven't been there yet, or if you haven't had a chance to explore, please do so. There is a lot of good information from reports about stormwater quality and related environmental issues, as well as the input summary from our first round of outreach. This is a process chart that gives a really big picture overview of the way that the city and county has approached this study. So in the summer, technical studies were launched, and that's an important part because all of the recommendations and what you're going to be hearing from tonight or this afternoon from JB. Sorry, I keep saying tonight because usually a lot of times they're doing community meetings. They are in the evening, so it just keeps rolling off my tongue. So I beg your pardon for that. But when you hear JB's presentation this afternoon, she'll be reporting back to you on some of the technical studies. And so this is really an information-based study that we're working through. An important part of the study is the stakeholder advisory group. And that was convened in the summer, and it represents a broad spectrum of interest: environmental, business, property owners, education. And I want to let you know that all of their meeting summaries, their agendas, they're all posted on the website. So it's a very transparent project. process. And then we have our focused community outreach, which is what we are doing here today with all of you. Earlier in the year, we had our first round where we conducted many meetings across Oahu and had a chance to really explain the who, what, why, and when of stormwater utilities and do our initial collection of feedback and input from community members. And now we're back out with our community outreach in round 2, where we're reporting back on what we heard in round 1 and then showing how we're building from what we heard through that process. Here's some snapshots of those first round meetings. We had lots of different kinds of activities so that people could participate and provide input in a way that felt easy and comfortable to them. And we held 18 of these meetings, and I hope that some of you who are on our meeting today were at some of those meetings. So one of the reasons why we had so many is because of how the city and county has prioritized the importance of hearing from a lot of people, but also people who are living in all the communities of Oahu. So let me now give you some snapshots of what we heard. So people coming to the meetings, some said, I'm here because I want to learn more about stormwater utilities. Others said, yeah, we need better stormwater management, and maybe a stormwater utility is a good answer to that. But we also heard a lot of people come in initially and say, I'm against another new fee. We pay enough already. But in those meetings, we were able to have really good discussions and hear about people's concerns and talk through what could make a utility for stormwater more acceptable to them and their communities. This slide lists the themes that we heard. And if you are interested in learning more, again, the feedback summary from the first round is posted on the website. And I'll tell you, probably in every meeting we had, in each of those 18 meetings, we heard each of these themes. So one of the themes we heard was people being interested in advocating for revenue neutrality. So that if there was going to be a new utility fee for stormwater, that perhaps there could be a corresponding reduction in property tax to offset the new fee. We also heard a lot about wanting assurances for accountability if there's going to be a new utility, and protecting that new stormwater fund so that it couldn't be rated for other uses. When we talked about the use of incorporation of credits and financial incentives in a stormwater utility, we heard a lot of enthusiasm about that, as well as ideas for different types of things people could do on their property to get a credit or some type of reduction on their bill. Interestingly too, we had a lot of questions about people wanting to know, what's the long-term vision? What's the long-term plan? What are the big ideas to better manage our stormwater that are really going to move the needle on creating cleaner water and a cleaner environment? There was also discussion about fee adjustments for those property owners who are able to manage stormwater on their properties. Another important theme was people advocating for investment of the stormwater fund in all of the neighborhoods and communities across Oahu. And then importantly, and particularly important theme, especially now as we're in this situation with COVID-19, is and just understanding the hardship that many people are dealing with right now, is that the stormwater utility really needs to address potential impacts of that fee to the elderly and low-income households, especially given Oahu's high cost of living. So that's a snapshot of what we heard in the first round. So here we are in our second round, and this is our calendar, which I'm assuming you've seen because you're here with us. You might have wondered, why are they doing so many meetings? And they're at different times of the day. They're on weekdays and weekends, and they're even doing a virtual meeting on Memorial Day. And the reason, it just goes back to us wanting to do everything we can to involve as many people as possible in this process. So we're holding these at lots of different times to make it as convenient and easy as we can for people to call in. Also, because we are online and you know, we're having to do our notifications and outreach and to get the word out about the meetings in a little bit of a different way. So we've blanketed social media, and we've been doing public service announcements, print ads, and again, just doing everything we can to get the word out. And so since we're early in the process, I would just want to really ask for your help in continuing to get the word out to your friends, colleagues, neighbors, anyone who you think should be interested in this. Let them know. And so there's plenty of time for them to participate, plenty more meetings. All right, JB, I'm gonna pass it to you. And after JB goes through her presentation about more information about what a stormwater utility is and what that could mean for Oahu, and then talking about some of those changes for then our path forward related to COVID-19, we're then going to get to our discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Joan. And thank you all for taking the time to be here with us. For those of you who did attend one of our first round meetings, some of this is going to be a refresher course on what stormwater utilities are. But we do have some important refinements and findings to talk about, as well as a different path forward revised due to the COVID-19 situation. So if we can move on.
Hang on, JB.
Okay.
JB, you should have a prompt to control the screen.
All right. And let's see if we can make the magic happen. All right. So what we have found, I'm fortunate to work with a lot of communities on the mainland and elsewhere, even up into Atlantic Canada, on different water resource issues. And Oahu is unique both in its physical setting, but also in the level of understanding and engagement people have with water and with our waters and with what happens to them from stormwater runoff. This is a wonderful sign that Kamehameha School's kids put up at the boat launch on the North Shore. And what we're talking about here and what we've been out in the community discussing is a change in how the city and county would fund its stormwater related services. And that word utility can trip people up a bit. What this is a study to look at changing how stormwater is funded to move from a property tax-based funding system to a fee-based funding system. It's not a proposal to create a new authority or a new department, but really to start to account for all of the expenses related to stormwater that go across city and county departments, and then fundamentally to change to a fee structure so that what's coming in for stormwater is paid by all, including taxable and non-taxable properties, and is proportional to impact, is based on, as we'll see, impervious cover on each site. What communities have found in switching to a stormwater fee or stormwater utility as their basis for funding is it provides much more efficient financing and much more stable and equitable financing, as well as much greater accountability to people for where is my money going? What am I going to see in services here on Oahu for paying my stormwater fee? We often refer to stormwater as sort of the overlooked utility, even though its impacts on our environment, our economy, on things like flooding and pollution and trash are very, very visible, especially to citizens on Oahu. Water and sewer have historically been funded through fees. You pay a water bill, and then those funds are restricted only to those expenses related to providing water service. Stormwater hasn't been treated that way until relatively recently with the move to form stormwater utilities or to fund stormwater based on fees. And particularly in Hawaii and on Oahu, there is a lot of scientific basis for understanding the very substantial adverse effects that stormwater specifically is having on the nearshore environment and on streams and wetlands around the island. On the project website, under the Learn page, we've posted a bunch of studies that have looked specifically at the contribution of stormwater to things like nutrient pollution. There's very strong evidence that it's stormwater in particular, not sanitary wastewater discharges, which are farther offshore, but stormwater in particular that's promoting the growth of non-native species of lemur. That is the source of a lot of the metals that are found in the marine sediments in reef flats and stream beds. And another really detailed study in Mamala Bay found that really stormwater non-point source discharges, so that runoff from parking lots, roads, over people's properties, is definitely having the principal impact on water quality rather than anything from a treated wastewater outfall. So particularly for Oahu, stormwater has been sort of fingerprinted scientifically as the source of a lot of the water quality problems that are being experienced. Again, just reinforcing that this stormwater system on Oahu is a separate storm sewer system. We call those MS4s, or Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. Sanitary wastewater sewage from toilets and sinks and showers is conveyed in separate pipes to treatment plants and treated to a very high degree before it's discharged. Stormwater, unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't get any treatment before it gets into streams and particularly into the ocean environment. A lot of what we're talking about tonight is how to fund the activities that will start to prevent stormwater pollution and then treat it where needed to improve the quality of our environment. So again, there we go. Separate storm sewer systems, like the one on Oahu, are regulated under a permit under the Clean Water Act by the US EPA. We call this the federal MS4 permit. And it requires the city and county, as the lead permittee, to take a series of very specific actions to reduce stormwater runoff volumes and to reduce stormwater pollution. The MS4 permit requires a certain series of capital projects, things like improving storm drains, what we call trash capture devices that get built into the storm drains to capture trash. There's a requirement for DFM to go in and retrofit properties to put green infrastructure treatment in where it has not been installed before, and to take very specific actions around inspections, street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, and also public education and outreach. And notwithstanding the COVID-19 issues, there has been no history of relief under the MS4 permit as a Clean Water Act permit. If anything, the restrictions have become more stringent over time, and in fact, the permit is in the process of being reissued with new requirements for DFM. So again, we see a lot of the activities that are the responsibility of DFM relate directly to those responsibilities under the federal MS4 permit. That includes construction site erosion control and inspections, water quality monitoring, education and involvement, preventing illicit discharges. But there's also responsibilities that are imposed by the state, by the legislature, and by the city council. Oahu has a big and a complicated stormwater system. These are some numbers about just how much infrastructure there is that has to be managed and accounted for. Currently, DFM does about 36,000 miles a year of street sweeping. There are almost 28,000 catch basins that have to be cleaned and maintained. DFM is averaging north of 2,000 construction site inspections annually. There are about 100 stream channels that require cleaning. And it's important to note that the requirements to repair erosional areas, which you see at the bottom of the photo, and to do the stream cleaning are imposed by the state. That is the responsibility of DFM to manage those activities and to fund them. And a responsibility imposed by City Council is that DFM is tasked with cleaning up homeless encampments and then storing the belongings that are there and disposing of any debris or trash. Encampments around Oahu tend to be in and near water resources, beaches, streams, culverts, and because of that, there are significant stormwater impacts from homelessness that are also now a DFM responsibility to address. So last year, a group of our colleagues at AECOM worked through what I call the search and rescue mission, looking through all of the city departments' budgets for the total cost and the total number of staff positions that are involved in addressing those stormwater management requirements. DFM is the lead department, but there are a lot of expenses in allied departments such as the Department of Planning and Permitting, Department of Design and Construction that are stormwater related very directly. Right now, on an annual average, the total cost to the city and county for all of the stormwater management activities is about $91.6 million. That varies a little bit from year to year, depending mostly on capital costs and some on operating, but that's about the average to stay in compliance with those permit directives. Currently, those funds are provided, they're split about $22 million coming from the highway fund, recognizing the share of that responsibility that relates to managing stormwater runoff from the roadway system. $70 million, though, the largest share, comes from property taxes. Those are paid, of course, by the owners of taxable property across Oahu. So that's roughly the breakdown of how much is being spent today and where that's coming from. Again, as the video introduced, since the early 1990s when the MS4 program started, at least 2,000 cities in the US and a few of our Canadian counterparts have established a stormwater fee as the primary source of providing stable funding for stormwater to really start to treat it as a utility more akin to our water supply and sanitary sewer. Most of the Great Lakes cities in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, nearly all of those communities and nearly all of Florida and the Carolinas use stormwater utility fees rather than property taxes to fund their programs. There are also some really dynamic programs in the Mid-Atlantic, in Kansas City, some in the Pacific Northwest, and increasingly we're seeing sort of a second wave of utilities being adopted in cities that didn't in the 90s. There are a lot of new programs in Texas and quite a few in California as well. So why make this switch? It has been the experience that using stormwater fees instead of property taxes provides much more predictable and stable funding to both meet the permit requirements and to provide better services. A water utility like our Honolulu Board of Water Supply has a pretty good idea of what its revenues are going to be from year to year. They're based on fees. They don't go up and down with the way that the general fund appropriations can when the city is facing other priorities or revenue shortfalls, as is unfortunately happening today. There's usually much better accountability because stormwater utilities must have specific accounting to ensure that all funds that come in and are expended are directly related to stormwater services. Typically, there's an annual audit, and almost universally, there's an annual report. What did we collect? How did we spend those funds? When communities have a stormwater fee, there's also a direct financial incentive for protecting waters, for taking actions on your property that reduce your contribution to stormwater runoff. So we get a built-in incentive for actions that really benefit not just those properties, but the waterways of Oahu as a whole. It does spread the cost across all properties rather than only being on taxable properties. That does mean that non-taxable properties pay, which we'll look at in a couple of examples. It also means that federal properties must pay stormwater fees. That's been established by federal law and by the courts. Federal facilities in any jurisdiction that has a stormwater utility must pay their equivalent stormwater fees. And that would be the case if the city and county here were to adopt a fee as well. So Again, for those of you that joined us in round one, this is going to be a refresher, but for those of you who didn't, first question that often comes up is, how will you figure out how much a fee is for each property? So we do that with a little bit of technical magic from aerial imaging and aerial photography. What you see in the photo are, this is a shot from over near Sand Island, and the red is building footprints. That's maintained by the Department of Planning and Permitting. And the purple are other impervious surfaces, which we derive from remote sensing satellite data. So that includes everything from walkways to driveways, parking lots, and that shows up in purple. The upshot is data is available that shows the exact amount of impervious surface on every single parcel on Oahu. So we've been able to estimate what fees would be and how much revenue would be generated under different scenarios from that. Again, couple of important features of a stormwater utility. One is that fees are charged to all property owners, taxable or non-taxable. Those funds go into a restricted fund. In city and county definitions, it's called a special fund that's restricted. Stormwater fees go in, and it can only be expended for stormwater services. It's accounted for separately from the general fund. Impervious surface is the basis for each parcel's fee, and credits are available to all property owners, which we'll talk about in a second. I do want to stress that even though we're talking about how much impervious cover, how much building, how much parking lot is on a property as the basis for the fee, stormwater utilities do not restrict development. They don't relate to zoning regulations. They're agnostic about zoning regulations. So adopting a stormwater fee would not affect what kind of development or how much development is allowed on any site. Okay, so again, a little bit on how the fees are calculated. This very rectangular lot on the right is a good illustration of how, through satellite imaging, we get the amount of impervious area on each parcel, and that is the basis for the fee. So the light blue areas, the driveway, the rooftop, the garage roof, the front yard walkway, the patio, you add up how many square feet of impervious area, and that's the basis for the fee. It's not the percentage of the lot, it's the actual square feet. It's also important to note, like the lot right below it is grass. It has no impervious cover. If there's no impervious cover on a lot, that parcel does not pay a stormwater fee. We usually set a threshold around like 300 square feet, but if there's no development and no impervious, that parcel does not pay a stormwater fee. Again, it's also very important, just like in a water supply system or a water utility, if your 3 teenage daughters leave the house and aren't showering all the time, your water bill should, at least theoretically, go down. Same thing goes for a stormwater utility. If you take away pavement, or if you put in systems to capture rainwater like the photo here, or to redirect roof runoff to a rain garden or a permeable area, those activities get a credit against your stormwater bill. Some utilities use rebates to make that more financially beneficial for property owners, so you get a one-time payment. Others do it as an ongoing credit, but the point is actions that reduce your impact, or reduce the amount of impervious surface or its impact, those get a financial reward in any stormwater utility system. Okay, so how much would this fee be? Again, with COVID-19's impacts on Oahu, a proposal to implement the fees has been delayed. It's been tabled until we see the economy recovering, and until City Council has time to take this up along with a proposal for credits, for hardship relief. But we have done some pretty detailed analysis of how much would need to be charged in order to fund a solid permit compliant stormwater program that's meeting citizens' needs. Where we've landed is that the fee would be probably about $475 to $483 per 1,000 square feet of impervious per month. What does that mean for different types of properties, for different sizes of properties and impervious? the median residential property on Oahu is about 3,900 square feet of impervious. If you think of a typical single family, someplace like Mililani, you're probably in the neighborhood of, call it $12 to $16 per month before any credits. Above 9,000 square feet, it's basically done based on the exact amount of impervious surface, and then it goes up proportionally. So it's about $42.75 for 9,000 square feet, or $47.50 for 10,000 square feet of impervious per month. Let's look at some real numbers on that, some real examples. Okay, here's a single family home with about 4,200 square feet, so just a little bit north of the typical. The monthly bill that would go to that property would be about $21 to $22 per month under the rate structure proposal that our stakeholder committee is evaluating right now. If you look at the gray bar on this chart, we've gone through, our financial team has gone through and calculated how much property tax from that parcel is going towards the cost of maintaining the stormwater system each month. So think about an annual property tax bill, divide that by 12. What this gray bar is telling you is how much of that monthly property tax is actually going to fund stormwater services. Right now, this single family property, about $41 a month of their property tax would be going towards stormwater services. Under a stormwater utility fee, they'd pay about $21 to $22 per month. This gets to that question about revenue neutrality. Will citizens who are currently paying property tax get something back, which is one of the things we've heard consistently from the community as we've gone through our outreach process. Okay, here is another example. This is your basic Safeway with alongs, and this has about 6 acres of impervious area when you add up the building and the parking lots and the driveway areas. Stormwater utility fee for this property, again, before credits, would be about $1,142 to $1,163 per month. That property's current property tax equivalent is about $1,138 per month. And here's an example of a church with a preschool. It has about half an acre of impervious. And we're not going to sugarcoat the fact that for non-taxable property, this would be a new fee. That's the case in all stormwater utilities nationally, where it does broaden the base of who's paying in for those stormwater services island-wide. In this case, this property would pay about $124 to $126 per month, again, before any credits that would be available. Okay, the next big question we get, what would citizens see for their fees? If we make this change to a different funding system, what's going to be better that we can see as citizens? The whole basis, again, this cost of service study that we went through last year and will be continuing to work on, looked not only at what's being spent now, but where there are gaps and why. Is it an issue of equipment, availability of financing, availability of workers? And where there's some really big gaps that would be able to be addressed with stable, predictable funding, on the operating side, the number one is stream channel cleaning. And we heard consistently from the community that this is a visible problem when it's not done. So ramping up stream channel cleaning, which requires both equipment and crews, is a very high priority for the program. Another is green infrastructure maintenance. Green infrastructure is wonderful. It has to be tracked and maintained to operate properly. So there's a real need there, again, for labor and for operating. Some of that can be done through community partnerships, which is another feature that we're hoping to accomplish here. Another big one is to get out into the drain line system, really identify where there are areas at risk that need to be dealt with more frequently, and get ahead of the cleaning and repair on those before they become emergencies. And there's also a real opportunity, again, if there's predictable and stable funding through fees, to use that funding to secure external grants that are available for things like building green infrastructure at schools. Right now, relying on annual appropriations from the general fund, that's something that DFM has not been able to do, that requires dedicated staff and some dedicated matching funds, but can leverage a lot of money. We see that with our high-performing utilities in places like Milwaukee, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. The other big benefit is to gain access by having fees for stormwater instead of general fund appropriations. DFM would be able to access very low-cost financing for the capital projects through the state revolving fund, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program, and also through the use of revenue bonds. Right now, dealing with capital financing is very challenging. It's really in competition with all of the other cities' needs. And so what we expect to see over time, if and when a fee is implemented, is actually reducing the annual outlay on capital slightly, because it'll be able to be dealt with over time through much more efficient low-cost financing, and increasing the operating expenses a little bit, about probably in the best case about a total of $15 million, 15 to 20 million on the operating side, again, to get those benefits and to be able to leverage grant funding that's available. We have much more detail on this in the slides from our stakeholder advisory group meeting. All of those slides and the backup information on the finances and budgets is available to you on the project website under the stakeholder advisory group tab. There are some big opportunities also, if a stormwater fee is adopted, to take some of those funds and reinvest them through community partnerships. We've been looking at carrying a budget of about 1.5% to 2% per year to be done through, to be used to leverage and invest in things like green infrastructure at schools or libraries or community facilities and churches. There's some big opportunities for using that need to maintain green infrastructure as a way to accomplish workforce development and to maintain the green infrastructure. There's some tremendous examples of that from Kansas City and Milwaukee that again really rely on having that stable year-to-year financing to create the partnerships with nonprofits to get that done. But that's a real opportunity. We would love your thoughts on organizations or projects or approaches that could really help get those stormwater funds back into the community in beneficial ways. So again, just a quick summary that this year DFM is not going to proceed with introducing a bill for an ordinance to City Council. This pause is going to be used to really address what would a credit program look like, so that businesses and property owners understand exactly what steps they could take to reduce their bill and what that final bill would look like. Work on an island-wide master plan to really say, what's the vision we're investing towards? Fleshing out a relief or hardship plan, and coming up with a way to ensure that at least some proportion of those stormwater fees gets reinvested in all of Oahu's neighborhoods. Okay, quite enough from me. I'm going to hand this back to Joan, and we look forward to your questions.
JB, thank you. We always appreciate your presentations. I want to make a note that we have been recording the presentation portion of this meeting. We're going to turn that off now. So I don't want anyone to be concerned that when you provide comment or speak during this meeting,